We are WURD 900 AM and 96.1 FM, Philadelphia. Streaming live at wordradio.com and the Word Radio app. Be sure to tune in to the candidate forum in the race for the Philadelphia District Attorney, live today from 5 to 6 p.m. And now, back to Evening Words with Dr. James Peterson on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media.
Evening Words is back on WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM, wordradio.com, and the Word Radio app. Folks, welcome to Justice on the Ballot, a district attorney discussion forum with District Attorney Larry Krasner and District Attorney candidate and former Judge Pat Dugan. Judge Dugan, D.A. Krasner, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both for joining us here. The current district attorney, Larry Krasner, and fellow candidate, former Judge Patrick Dugan, are running in the Democratic primary for District Attorney of Philadelphia on May 20th. No Republican candidate has filed to run in the general election. The District Attorney of Philadelphia is responsible for charging and prosecuting accused criminals. The office decides what offenses someone will be charged with and can also determine sentencing via plea deals. Current DA Larry Krasner was first elected in 2017 and is running for his third term. Candidate former Judge Pat Dugan is a former judge on the Philadelphia Municipal Court, here to discuss a variety of subjects that Philadelphians and Word Radio listeners feel are extremely important and prevalent. We are happy to welcome and introduce to Evening Words District Attorney candidate for our District Attorney Candidate Forum, DA Larry Krasner and former Judge Dugan. Thank you guys so much for joining us here. I want to get to the structure first, and then we're going to just jump right in. So each candidate is going to get 2 minutes to answer each question directed to them, and then there'll be 2 minutes for a rebuttal, and then 1 minute for a follow-up or clarification of responses. After being notified that you've taken your allotted time, you can finish your sentence, but we're going to have to move on after that in order to keep time with the short amount of time that we have you all here together. You will get an audio signal when you have 10 seconds left in your response. So please be mindful of that so we can get through all the questions that we have taken from our listeners and from the community that will serve as the constituency for the Office of the District Attorney. Before we start our forum questions, let's start with having our candidates state their opening remarks. You each have 1 minute. A coin toss held before the show determined that District Attorney Larry Krasner will deliver his opening statement first. District Attorney Krasner, your minute will begin as soon as you begin speaking, sir.
Good evening, and I really appreciate everyone listening in, but I have a big question. I read an article in the Northeast Times that says there's a well-funded effort to have my opponent, former Judge Pat Dugan, be the Republican candidate. I said the Republican candidate if he does not win in the Democratic primary through a write-in effort. I can tell you I have no reservation in saying that as a lifelong Democrat, I would never run as a Republican, nor would I want to be endorsed by Republicans. And there have been donors, there have been petition signers. There apparently is an independent expenditure group, which means big money, behind an effort to have Judge Dugan, if he should not win the Democratic primary, be the Republican candidate. So I think we need to know as Democrats from you, Judge Dugan, I'm going to ask you to answer this during our remarks. Will you ever run for office as a Republican? Or will you commit that you will never run for office as a Republican?
Judge Dugan.
Statement, not to Larry Krasner, but I'm Pat Dugan. I'm a lifelong Democrat, have been so my entire life, and I'm running for DA. I am getting off the bench because I'm not satisfied with what has been going on for the last 7 years. My mother, when I was 6 or 7, got off the step because a young man was getting beat by neighborhood old heads with a board. My mother got off the step, got in between those kids with the board, pushed them away, brought that kid over to the steps, and protected him until the police arrived and he was ushered off safely. I did the same thing as a paratrooper going to Iraq and Afghanistan as a 43-year-old, and the only reason I resigned was to take on the non-prosecution, the 3,200 murders that have occurred in Philadelphia in the last 7 years.
Thank you both for your opening statements. We're now going to start the question portion of the Justice on the Ballot discussion forum. I will make a note to you all that we just had a couple of fascinating interviews from some re-entering citizens, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But the first question goes to DA Larry Krasner. District Attorney Krasner, you've cast yourself in this race as not just a district attorney, but as a democracy advocate. What do you see as the DA's role in protecting Philadelphians from the autocracy and sometimes negative attitudes directed toward the city from Donald Trump's administration? And what, if anything, can the DA do realistically here to address those things and protect people in terms of what they perceive as the erosion of our democracy?
Well, the first thing I can do is not run as a Republican. And you may have noticed that Judge Dugan did not answer that question. In fact, he said he didn't want to answer it. I would encourage you, sir, I would, and I say that respectfully, to answer that question for these viewers. They are entitled to know if you are a Democrat or a Republican. We are dealing with a situation in which the head of the Republican Party is trying to overthrow the government of the United States. He is a wannabe dictator. That is the head of the party that seems to be trying to wrap its arms around you. They have not wrapped their arms around me at all. In fact, they've been at war with me from jump. So I think it's a fair question. Having said that, I will tell you that there's a lot that local prosecutors can do, such as the district attorney in Philadelphia. Number one, Trump cannot pardon our convictions, okay? This is why Donald Trump has 34 felony convictions in New York State Court, courtesy of District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who's a friend of mine. He has them because he cannot pardon them. That's extremely important. Number two, we have the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which says that the president cannot order local law enforcement authorities to do his business, that there's a separation of powers. We literally have a legal right to say no. If he says, stop worrying about homicides, stop worrying about rapes, stop all that, let's drag a bunch of hardworking immigrants who are, for the most part, just taking care of their kids out the front door, and let's deport them. And oh, trust me, I intend to say no. Wherever the law and the Constitution says that we can resist a man who wants to overthrow the government of the United States, I intend to say no. I think it is the very least that I can do, given my father's volunteering and serving in World War II, given the reality that so many 19-year-olds died on beaches or died at Pearl Harbor. I think it's the very least I can do to have.
Thank you, District Attorney Krasner. We appreciate that response. Judge Dugan, as you prepare your rebuttal response here, can you answer the District Attorney's question about whether or not you can commit to remaining on one side of the political aisle? Are you going to run as a Republican if you lose this primary?
I am not running as a Republican. I'm running as a Democrat. If other people are trying to do something, I have nothing to do with that. And I wonder if Larry's going to answer a bunch of questions that I have. Are you going to prosecute illegal dumping? You haven't done it in 7 years. You're going to do it in July, finally. So we've had 3,200 murders in the city of Philadelphia, right? Retail thefts have gone off the wall. I can tell you that Larry Krasner is the biggest reason why Donald Trump won the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because people are fed up with you not prosecuting. You have the lowest gun conviction rate that we've ever had. You are not doing the main job of a prosecutor, Larry, holding people accountable. You unilaterally did exactly what Trump did. You had your own executive order saying retail theft is now a ticketable offense. You threw away the statute that Harrisburg wrote, and you allowed the retail thefts to go from 7,200 before you, and there were 22,000 last year with an arrest rate below 5%. Now, that's not even how many have been charged. You are unilaterally pushing stores like Wawa, Home Depot, CVS, Rite Aid, Lowe's out of the city, these mom and pop stores. This is why so many people voted for Donald Trump in the city of Philadelphia, a diehard Democratic city, because of your non-prosecution policies. And I can tell you that I'm a better reformer than you are. You say it, but I lived it for 17 years on the bench as a judge. The programs that I was involved in, the programs that you didn't want to support.
DA Krasner, you get 1 minute for rebuttal, but hold on, Judge Dugan, you said 3,200 murders. We have fact checkers here. I just need to understand what that number was from that you were citing.
From the day Larry Krasner took office up till now.
That there have been 3,200 murders since DA Krasner has been in office.
Roughly 3,200 murders, that's
I
correct.
just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Judge Dugan.
No problem.
District Attorney Krasner, can you please take your minute for rebuttal now?
Sure. Unlike my opponent, I will actually answer his question. We have prosecuted illegal dumping more than once in this administration, and we will
How
do
many
it in
times? I'm
the
sorry.
future. Excuse me.
You're right. I apologize.
Okay.
Apologize.
Point one. Number two, you're going to hear a lot of this. You're going to hear about a guy who apparently is beloved of the Republican Party as a true reformer. You're going to hear these factoids, these pieces of data that are grabbed from somewhere with no reference to what they're actually about. This is not fact. This is anecdata. It is going to be a pile of ludicrous claims, like the ludicrous claim that when we prosecute 35,000 new cases a year, we don't prosecute at all. And as for the suggestion that somehow Donald Trump won because of me, boy, that's interesting, because when I ran the first time, he had taken the state by 40,000 votes, and I turned out in one city 50,000 who hadn't voted before.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. The next question goes to you, Judge Dugan. Many longtime Philadelphia residents whose immigration status is uncertain are living in fear of being targeted for deportation by ICE, and the Trump administration recently ratcheted up the pressure by threatening federal funding of sanctuary cities, which would likely include Philadelphia. As District Attorney, what is your stance on cooperating with ICE, and what will you do to ensure that immigrant residents, many of whom are from African and Caribbean countries and deeply rooted in this city, are protected from unjust or excessive enforcement?
Well, so it's very clear. I support sanctuary city status here in Philadelphia. Obviously, that starts with the mayor, and I will back her with that. As far as the Trump administration, I will give zero cooperation to the Trump administration or to any federal agency that wants to come in here and remove people from Philadelphia, regardless of their status. He's even talked about citizens being sent off to some foreign land as well. So I plan on standing shoulder to shoulder. Yes, we could go into courts. Hopefully judges will have more and more backbone to push back on that. But we need to educate our communities as well. We need to explain to them the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant if these ICE agents have them. The judicial warrant, unfortunately, the federal government can literally come into the place. The administrative warrants, they cannot. We need to make sure we're educating our people about that. We also need to give them protection so that they come in, they're not afraid to come in and complain, be a complaining witness, to come in and support something in the criminal justice system. So I plan on zero cooperation with any policy like that coming out of DC.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. District Attorney Krasner, your rebuttal?
Is this two minutes, Dr.
2 minutes, yes it is.
Thank you. So I'm glad to hear my opponent saying that. That's not what he was saying at all at the beginning. What he was saying at the beginning was, gee, it's tough. I don't know. What are we going to do? But I guess the message we've been putting out is sinking in. And so I must agree with him. I think that those are correct answers, even if they came from me first. I think that they're correct answers. Now, having said that, he did miss part of it, which is that ICE agents may act within their legal powers. And even if I find it offensive personally or immoral, I cannot and will not interfere with that. But sometimes they go beyond their legal powers. And if they do, they are subject to prosecution in Philadelphia, as are that small number of police officers who commit crimes. And I will prosecute them for their crimes in the same way I have prosecuted Philadelphia police officers for their crimes. Please compare that to what my opponent did with Officer Josie. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the story, the short version is a very large police officer punched a very small woman for no reason at all.
Krasner, we are going to get to that in this interview. You will both have a chance to talk specifically about that issue. I don't know if you want to use your time now to talk about it.
Very well. Then I'll wait for that opportunity. But the point is, you got to have a prosecutor who's actually willing to prosecute ICE, not one who somehow has so much affection coming from a Republican Party run by Donald Trump, not one where there is outside money that is being invested so that my opponent's name will be written in on the Republican side and he can become the Republican candidate. We have to have a DA who is credible for pushing back, fighting back, holding law enforcement accountable at a moment when we are on the precipice. We're on the edge of potentially losing this country entirely. My record establishes, with our historic convictions of a small number of police officers for terrible crimes, that that's exactly what I would do.
Thank you, District Attorney. Mr. District Attorney, you do get a 1-minute rebuttal here, Judge Dugan.
Well, Larry has one opponent in his race, and last I looked, he's not actually on the ballot. He's running against Donald Trump. I'm running against the policies of Larry Krasner for the last 7 years, including that murder rate and the fact that we've had 10,000 people shot in the city of Philadelphia. By the way, Larry, most of them are black and brown skin complexion. And what is the conviction rate for these people walking around with guns shooting our citizens? You talked about illegal dumping. You said you're not going to do it until July when you get a budget. What do you need a budget for to prosecute somebody who's dumping tires into the river? And Larry, how many of those have you actually done? And can you explain your retail theft policy, how it went over 300% in those 7 years? Now you have a retail task force. Why didn't you do that from the beginning?
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Just a quick fact check. According to our fact checkers here, since the district attorney has been in office in January 2018, there have been 2,965 murders. Just want to get the facts straight here for our listeners, folks. The next question goes to District Attorney Krasner. While violent crime in Philadelphia has seen a dramatic decrease during the last few years, many WRD radio listeners still say the city doesn't feel safe. Some critics argue your approach resembles that of a public defender more than a prosecutor, prioritizing systemic reform over day-to-day safety. As you seek a third term, how do you respond to those concerns, and what is your plan to restore both real and perceived safety for communities who may support your reform agenda, but they also want to feel safe and secure in their neighborhoods?
So thank you for that. Here are the facts. We have the lowest number of homicides on today's date, which is May the 8th, 2025, that we have had on May the 8th for 50 years. Those are the facts. We are way, way, way below where we were when I took office in 2018. And you're not going to hear my opponent mention the word pandemic. There's a reason for that, which is that we know that the pandemic caused sweeping criminal justice problems in every big city in the United States. But the difference in Philadelphia is that once we reached that terrible peak, which happened all over the country, Philadelphia, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but for 4 years, has been leading big cities in terms of improvement in public safety. Getting more specific, we reached the peak. Homicides dropped nationally among big cities 8%. Philly dropped 11%. The next year, homicides dropped nationally 13%. That was the average of big cities, 1 million or more. Philly dropped 20%. Last year, homicides dropped nationally 23% on average among big cities. Philly dropped 35%. And right now, it is 28% down from there. It is not just that we are on this train of cities that are enjoying public safety improvements. It's not just that last year was the best year for public safety improvement in the United States in recorded history. It is that we are consistently leading. We are consistently ahead, which is why we were reported nationally last year as leading, with a locomotive on the train, this public safety improvement. That is exceptional, given that we are still the poorest of the 10 largest cities. It's exceptional, given that Pennsylvania has out of control availability of guns thanks to our Republican legislature. So it is a whole lot more than how you feel. We have to understand how people feel, but I'm just going to keep telling the truth with the facts until people hear it.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. Judge Dugan, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal response here.
Sure. If we're looking at the murder rate, and I understand what the fact checkers are saying, but when I do the math, it comes up 3,032. So, Yes, but okay, we're talking a 200 or 300 difference, but
That's a lot of lives. There's a lot of lives of difference. We want to get it right, too.
oh
Judge
no,
Dugan,
no,
for sure.
you're right, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So a lot of lives, one is too many. So if we go back to 2016 and 27, the 2 years prior to Larry Krasner, we had 277 murders and 315 murders. I say that right now we are going back to pre-Krasner numbers last year and this year. Why? I think that we can go to what Commissioner Bethel and Mayor Parker are doing, along with the Director of Public Safety, which Larry has publicly said a couple of times, I don't work for her, I don't work for him, and he doesn't cooperate with them. They're not working together. That is a fact. Look at the fact that the incumbent district attorney has not been endorsed by the mayor. You would think it would be obvious for the mayor to come out for him. It hasn't happened. The public perception of not being safe is real. All you have to do is look at the news. A police officer shot, a little kid shot. It happens every single day in this city. There's violence. Victims are not being communicated with. Where am I hearing this from? Besides seeing it in court these last 7 years, I'm seeing it everywhere I go. Whether it's at 32nd and Huntington, it doesn't matter where I go. In our first debate that we had, that was all your people, Larry. I had a woman there who was helping clean up, started crying to me about her son who was killed, yet your office stopped communicating with her. These folks do not feel safe because they're not.
You have 1 minute. Thank you, Judge Dugan. You have 1 minute for the rebuttal, District Attorney Krasner.
I wonder what all your people means. That's a very interesting phrase. But let's just move on from that. What did you just hear, viewers? You heard numbers that are wrong. You heard facts that are wrong, completely wrong. You heard fear-mongering. Who does that remind you of? I just sat here and gave you all the specifics. I just gave you 4 years of results that tell you what's going on, that we're leading the country in advancing public safety. And you just heard my opponent say to you, none of that's true. It all happened under the Parker administration. Great things are happening under the Parker administration. But the facts don't lie. The numbers don't lie. Unfortunately, the Republican Party that is so fond of my opponent, and I have never seen that in a Democratic primary before. I've never seen the Republican Party wrap its loving arms around someone who's running as a Democrat. What you are hearing are exactly the tactics of the Republican Party and their leader, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. We're going to move on to our next question. This one is for you, Judge Dugan. You've proposed restructuring the District Attorney's Office into 6 geographic divisions, each with its own assigned prosecutor to liaise with the community and support victims, relevant to what you all were just talking about. Some listeners have questioned whether this would be an inefficient use of resources and have asked whether we already have city prosecutors doing this work. Can you clarify how your proposed structure would work in practice and how it would improve public safety or justice outcomes without duplicating efforts or wasting money?
Yeah, it actually worked under previous district attorney's office where the city's divided up into 6 police divisions and assigning a senior assistant district attorney with a team there who's based one of their jobs is to liaison with that specific area so that people in that area can communicate with this specific DA about what's going on with a case that was involving them or the neighborhood. It's also a way of getting intelligence so that the neighborhood, the community, people who go to the PDACs, people go to the community meetings, going to the churches, etc., they can communicate directly with somebody about the nuisance bars, the nuisance stores, what's going on in this playground, outside this rec center, where you can go to somebody specifically about a horrible crime that was committed at the corner store. So the neighbors want to come to court so they can represent the neighborhood. They can support the victims. Right now, that's not occurring. We used to have that structure, and it stopped, I believe, 7.5 years ago. So I want to bring that back so there can be this good communication back and forth, because too many victims, too many family members are telling the courts telling other people in the system that the district attorney's office has not communicated with them well enough. Now, recently, he's hiring all these other extra victims advocates. Kudos. We got to keep doing that. But time and time again, and these mothers have formed organizations complaining about it. I want to have that communication right then and there, so you're not just calling a main number trying to find a prosecutor. The bus drivers, they came to me and asked me if I could help them because of a situation just like that.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Mr. District Attorney, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal response.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So did you hear that phrase, bring that back? You're going to hear a lot of that because most of what Judge Dugan is proposing is to bring back things from the past. He wants to go backward, okay? I mean, what else would you expect from someone who is so embraced by the Republican Party? He wants to go backward. The geographical approach was used. I had over 10,000 clients during the 30 years before I became DA. I tried over 2,000 cases, a lot of them felony cases, and so I saw that it wasn't a terrible idea, but it is not as good as what we have now, which is we have subject matter specialization instead of this geographical approach, which has very uneven workloads and doesn't solve the problems that we need to solve. You're going to hear a whole lot of this backward-looking, something that happened in the past stuff, but what you're not going to hear is the actual qualifications of Judge Dugan. Judge Dugan was a misdemeanor judge. What that means is that, to the best of my knowledge, he has no significant history of trying a homicide case, a rape case, or any other felony case, either as a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, or get this, as a judge. He literally has not heard a felony trial as a judge because that's not what misdemeanor judges do. Their function is important, don't get me wrong, but the notion of someone telling us how to change a system, the notion that that person is going to supervise very experienced homicide prosecutors, he's never done jury instructions for such a case, he's never tried such a case, he doesn't know the law and what evidence is admissible, and he's sitting in judgment on a team of people who are supremely qualified and frankly way better than the people who were there during the 30 years when I was trying cases as a private attorney. I mean, it's just absurd. You know, we do have to look at the qualifications of the person who is throwing out all of this criticism of a system that is actually working remarkably well.
Judge Dugan, you have 1 minute for your response to District Attorney Krasner's rebuttal.
Yeah, unlike Larry, I'll actually supervise prosecutions, unlike he does. So, Larry, maybe you could explain Sergio Highland to us.
Judge Dugan, that's our very next question, Judge Dugan, so you might not want to use your time here for that.
How about Steve Jones? We're going to talk about him, too?
That's our very next question, Judge Dugan, so you might not want to use your time for that.
Let's talk about, how about solicitation of a prostitute, Larry? How many of those Johns have you prosecuted? Those women out there are victims. Those men and women out there trapped in the sex trade. How many Johns have you prosecuted? We used to have a program in lowly municipal court where we would actually make them come to a class on a Saturday morning. They'd pay $250 and watch a video to show how those women and men were real people. How many people have you prosecuted for solicitation of a prostitute? I believe it might be a big fat zero because you've legalized it. The Johns, Larry, not even we're talking about the sex workers, but those idiots that are patronizing them and victimizing them day in and day out. I mean, come on, Larry.
Thank you, Judge Dugan, for that piece. And as I mentioned about 30 seconds ago, the next question is for District Attorney Krasner. Mr. DA, earlier this month, Sergio Highland publicly endorsed your candidacy on behalf of the Working Families Party, and just days later, he was charged with fatally shooting a woman, a case your office said was worked on in close coordination with the police. In February, you appeared at a meeting alongside 52nd Ward leader Stephen Jones, who had just been convicted of child sexual abuse in a case prosecuted by your office. How do you respond to concerns that you're disconnected from what's happening within your own office, and what is your approach to leadership and oversight in terms of how you ensure public trust in your management and judgment? So
what you just described are two stories of integrity. You have a ward leader who is someone that some of my predecessors would pander to. I vigorously prosecuted him. We had a hung jury. We retried him. We convicted him. And the moment he was convicted, I tried to have him locked up. Please explain to me how that indicates I wanted to be in a photograph with him. The reality is Steve Jones is a very common name in a city of 1.6 million people. And I don't treat people differently or better because they are ward leaders. I do not what is political. I do what has integrity. The situation with Sergio Hyland is, frankly, even sillier. Mr. Hyland did 20 years in jail for a homicide. He was prosecuted by one of my predecessors. He completed his sentence. He got out. I barely know the man. He has never worked for me. He has never worked on the campaign or in my office. And when it was determined that he committed a second homicide, we immediately arrested him, and we are vigorously prosecuting him. Sergio Hyland, in all likelihood, will spend the rest of his life in jail. So once again, explain to me why these stories of integrity, of being willing to go after people whether they support you or not politically in an election cycle, explain to me how that shows anything other than my qualification to actually be district attorney. When the Steve Jones case, Steve Jones situation happened, Steve Jones, of course, was removed as ward leader shortly after. I called for his removal, or maybe around the same time, I don't remember, but he was removed. When all of that stuff happened, the Dugan campaign put out a press release that had 3 lies in the title. And that takes some work. Not 1 lie, 3 in the title. Do you want a district attorney who is so willing to take stories of integrity and flip them upside down to benefit himself, when I, on the other hand, will do what is necessary when it doesn't necessarily benefit me?
Thank you, Mr. DA. Judge Dugan, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal.
Sure. So right after Steve Jones was prosecuted and found guilty, Larry went and sought his endorsement. A bunch of judges went there as well, but they didn't know that Steve Jones was just prosecuted. Larry is actually either lying or he's the most inept prosecutor in charge ever, because there were multiple judges who recused themselves from that case and told the prosecutors in the courtroom, because Steve Jones was a ward leader, and they didn't want to go. They didn't want to put somebody in front of them as a ward leader because they had dealings with him before, just like Larry did. The previous, when he ran before, he gave him Larry gave Steve Jones $3,500, and after he was found guilty, Larry went to his ward meeting and tried to get him again. That's nonsense. There's so many Steve Jones. You knew him in 2017. You knew him this cycle as well. As far as Sergio would come and heckle me for you, Larry, at that first debate. You've been at seminars with him where you're on a panel together, and multiple events and photographs. Speaking of ethics, judge after judge calls out your integrity, Larry. Judge after judge. You haven't paid your taxes on the building on Spruce Street. The ethical violations by the Ethics Commission here in Philadelphia in reference to the last 2 campaigns, where you paid your staff out of your Soros-backed money, justice coming out of San Francisco 2 times. What was the fine? $60,000? You were recently fined $120,000 by a judge. Every single attorney in your office has been ordered to take ethics classes involving candor to the court. That's unheard of, Larry. What's going on? Everybody's just coming at you, or you're unethical?
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Mr. District Attorney, I know you want to respond to those accusations in 1 minute, but I just want to make sure that you heard the full piece of the question. You talked about integrity in your initial response, but I was also asking about listeners and callers and your constituents asking about your judgment about some of these things, right? It's yes, integrity is one side of it, but then your judgment in the same context. But again, I'll give you your minute to respond how you will.
Unfortunately, what we're seeing is kind of what we saw with Carlos Vega when he ran against me, which is, what I referred to then as a lasagna of lies. You basically take these quarter truths, these half truths, these untruths, and you spit them out so fast that it's impossible to even get notes on them, much less answer them directly. We have seen these tactics before. We know who they come from. We know where they come from. And it is once again no surprise that we have a candidate opposing me who is beloved of a party led by someone who is a compulsive liar, who just says one crazy thing after the other. and says it without flinching. That is what you are seeing going on here. The reality is that we have shown integrity time and time again, but when you're trying to make change, and it is embarrassing to some people, including some judges who were part of the prior administration, they're going to say things and do things because they don't want the change.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. Next question goes to you, Judge Dugan. In 2013, you acquitted a police officer who was caught on video striking a woman during the Puerto Rican Day Parade, a moment you yourself called disturbing, but said was not enough to convict. That decision has continued to raise concerns among those who are advocating for police accountability. As a district attorney candidate, how do you respond to voters who question whether you can be trusted to hold law enforcement accountable? And what is your track record? What in your track record can assure our listening audience that you have a level of understanding of addressing the centuries of harm afflicted to black people in our community by the criminal justice system?
Okay. So yes, I did make that decision back in 2013 based off the evidence that was presented to me in court. And if somebody reviews the transcripts, basically both sides put up a lot of evidence that said that Officer Josie should probably not be found guilty. There were 10 character witnesses presented by the defense. One character witness alone is enough for a judge to decide that that you can find a person not guilty. The only expert that testified that day was a witness who testified that the use of force by Jonathan Josie did not rise to the level of criminality. I did find that it was disturbing, but that's what the witness told me. Police officers came in and testified that they were scared. Things were being thrown at them. Based off all the evidence that was presented in front of me, I found Officer Josie not guilty. So I'm not afraid to make tough decisions. I'm going to follow the evidence. And yes, as a lowly misdemeanor court, I have found police officers not credible. I've also held police officers for trial for one stealing in a bar. I did find that case should move forward. My ethics are not questioned. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, this lowly municipal court judge was one of 9 original judges who were appointed to the Judicial Ethics Advisory Board when they revamped the whole system. There are over 1,000 judges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, yet the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania have enough faith in me and my integrity to put me on that board. I am not afraid to make tough decisions, so I will follow the evidence.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. District Attorney Krasner, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal here.
Thank you. So I anticipated that kind of, how shall I put it, less than candid answer. So I'm going to ask the viewers, would you rather trust your eyes or trust your ears? Because you need to see the video that captures the entire incident in which a very large police officer, literally twice the size of this small woman, walks over to her when she's done absolutely nothing wrong, punches her hard in the face, and as she is falling down with his left arm, he pushes her to the ground. Where can you see it? Well, there's a number of places, but because I knew this answer was coming, it's available on my Instagram, @LarryKrasner. It's also on Facebook, Larry Krasner for DA. I encourage you to watch that. And if you watch that video and you believe what you just heard from Judge Dugan, then vote for him. I say that because I know none of you will. Once you see that video, you frankly are going to be shocked. It was such a shocking incident when it occurred that it was reported in Europe. You can find the same video in a Guardian article that's still around from back in those days. We cannot have a district attorney who looks around and is so ambitious about his future. And by the way, Judge Dugan has run for a whole lot of stuff, including very recently. He doesn't always win, but boy, does he keep running. We cannot have a district attorney who is so ambitious and so hungry that when he sees a room full of police officers and he perceives political power there, and by the way, has someone very close to him who was a police officer in the room to make it clear what side he's supposed to be on, he does that. We need to have a prosecutor who is strictly going to go by the facts, who is going to impose even-handed justice, and my administration has shown historic victories in holding that small number of police officers who commit crimes accountable.
Judge Dugan, before you get to your 1 minute rebuttal, I just want to say something to both of you. You know, our time is short here. I can repeat any questions if you need me to, but I would advise you both to really try to answer the questions. And so the back half of this initial question, Judge Dugan, is what also in your track record can you talk to us about that can assure this community, our listening community, and really the citizens of Philadelphia, that you have some level of understanding of ways to address the centuries of harm that has impacted the black community from the criminal justice system. Now, neither one of you have responded specifically to that in this question. I'm just encouraging you both. If you didn't hear the whole question, or if my question is too long, I'm happy to repeat it. But Judge Dugan, you do have now 1 minute to respond to the district attorney's rebuttal.
Okay. Jerry Mondesire actually had an opinion contemporaneously on my decision, thought I made the right decision. But here's what I've done. I go into the jails. I get in a van, and I would ride out to Graterford Prison with young veterans, most of them young black males, and we would go into the prisons with the lifers, and they took peer mentoring classes, and I would go into the jails with them to have these roundtable conversations so that those men would not wind up out there. During COVID, I went into the prisons with just a mask to handle the prisoners who were stuck in jail. There was no date in sight. So most of them, young black men sitting in jail, I went in there with just a mask to handle their cases so they weren't sitting there just rotting away. So I am willing to step up and take care of folks who have not been served properly by the systemic racism in this criminal justice system.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. The next question goes to you, Mr. District Attorney. Over the past 3 years, more than 1,800 charges have been filed annually against juveniles in Philadelphia with crimes like auto theft and non-fatal shootings involving youth under 18. At the same time, there's been an ongoing debate about how our justice system should treat young offenders. In 2021, you pledged to end what you called a coercive practice, forcing kids to plead guilty in order to be transferred to juvenile court. But the Philadelphia Inquirer recently wrote that this tactic is once again routine. How do you explain the rollback in policy? And are there any circumstances in which you would pursue adult charges when you would prioritize rehabilitation in the juvenile system?
So thank you for the question. By the way, in answer to the second part of the last question, my entire career shows it. From the minute I became a public defender in 1987 till the moment I became a civil rights lawyer, and for 30 years when I worked on behalf of people who, let's just say, were not the insiders, they were the outsiders. And yes, they also included the African-American community. I don't think there's really any question about that, nor is there a question that the last 7 years have also been tangible proof of my belief in even-handed justice and equality. I consider it the bedrock of this country. It's part of what makes me so angry about Donald Trump and his Nazi friends and what they are up to. In terms of juvenile justice, it is a fact that when we came in, there were about 680 juveniles in jail-like settings. We reduced that by 70%. It is also a fact that that my policy from the beginning was I was not in love with people being required to plead guilty if they were going back to juvenile court. Some of that has happened. I don't like it. We have adjusted that. Some of it happened just because certain attorneys, I guess, didn't follow the memo or didn't get the memo. Sometimes it happened because a judge refused to send them back to juvenile court. It is their decision, not ours, let us be clear. But a judge refused to send them back unless that was part of the deal. But I can tell you it is committed to writing now. It is one of our policies that we will only do this in rare and exceptional circumstances, but they exist. One circumstance would be a situation in which we really feel a juvenile should be back in juvenile court, but a judge is refusing to do it unless there is a requirement of some sort of a plea occurring. You have to make a choice between difficult options under those circumstances. I will say this, though, I'm extremely proud of what we've done with juvenile justice. We have changed things in remarkable ways despite all the pressure to put all the kids into adult court, and we're going to keep fighting for them.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. Judge Dugan, your 2 minutes for your rebuttal to the juvenile justice question.
Yeah, the opening standard is you have to treat them as children. And with that, we have to figure out a way so that we could turn them around. And by that, that's a lot of structure, that might not, I'm not talking about placement, I'm talking about structure from the community, churches, school, mentorships. One of the things that I've been doing when I'm going around the city, and I presented to a couple of black fraternities, I've asked each one of those men, whether I win or lose, to step up and be a mentor, because we have to figure out why these kids are doing it so we can prevent them. We have to get parents to start looking underneath the mattress for these guns. Why are we allowing our children to walk around with masks on unless they have an immune deficiency issue? Why aren't we stepping up as the society, all of us, to make sure that they have to stop doing this? Why is a kid walking around with a ski mask in the middle of April? We need to all step up and see what we could do with that. Now, in reference to what's been going on in the DA's office, I got to be honest with you. As he said, I was a misdemeanor judge, right? I'm not sitting in juvenile court, but I was a child advocate, and we have to go to the root causes to try to assist them. And unfortunately, when they start putting bodies on those guns that these kids are running around with, unfortunately, yeah, they're going to go to adult court. But prior to that, we've had this conversation, Larry and I do want to bring in some experts and sit around at a round table and try to figure this out much better. Larry's going to tell us he's got Bob Listenby, yet look at all the problems that we still have. So we got to figure out a way to do it better. And I want to bring as many people as I can from the community to figure out how we could do this better.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Our next question goes, Mr. District Attorney, you get 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Sure, thank you. I do want you to know that I appreciate that even though Judge Dugan never actually practiced as a defense lawyer or a prosecutor or a judge in a juvenile court matter, I appreciate the fact that he was a child advocate. I think that's good and important work, just like I think the work that he did with Veterans Court is good and important work. But listen to what he said. He said, I'll get together some people and figure it out, okay? I don't need to do that. I practiced in juvenile court as a public defender. I practiced in juvenile court as a private attorney. I've been over there as the district attorney. And my first assistant was Barack Obama's chief of juvenile justice for the United States of America. Okay? We don't need to figure it out. We have the dream team. We're doing the best we can in a moment when there is a spike in juveniles being arrested for serious crimes that involve shootings. I think qualifications matter. I think experience matters, as opposed to saying, I'll get people together and figure it out.
Thank you for that response, Mr. District Attorney. Next question goes to you, Judge Dugan. It's about mental health. May is National Mental Health Month, and in Philadelphia, we continue to see individuals with serious mental health issues end up in the criminal justice system instead of receiving the care they need. One tragic example that you both know of is the 2020 police killing of Walter Wallace Jr., a 27-year-old man experiencing a mental health crisis. His family called for an ambulance, not the police, but he was shot multiple times in front of his family after officers responded without proper mental health support. Given Philadelphia's ongoing crisis at the intersection of mental health and criminal justice, how would you, as district attorney, help ensure people like Walter Wallace Jr. are met with care instead of bullets?
Well, this is something that I've been involved with while I was sitting on the bench for the last 17 years. And I think the first step with what happened with Mr. Wallace was, and I believe this is starting to occur, where the police officers are trained better, that there are some support staff in the mental health world to come out and assist officers now when there is a crisis for one of our citizens. So we need to continue to do that. Again, with people like a forward-thinking police commissioner, I think that can only get better, the training, so that our first responders know what they're doing. But in terms of some of the things that I've done on the bench, mental health has been a very big part of the programs that I've been involved with, whether it was something as lowly as the alternative misdemeanor program, where we would actually have a mental health specialist, a nurse in the courtroom to assess people when they first come into the court. Once they come into the room, they get interviewed, and then we have a mental health specialist and a nurse talk to them to find out what's going on with them to see what we could do. We have a world-renowned mental health court here in Philadelphia. We use part of that in Veterans Court, in the holistic type of approach to criminal justice. I started a resource center when I was the president judge. My peers elected me to be the president judge for a 5-year term, and I opened up a resource center in the basement of the Criminal Justice Center. And whether you're a defendant, a victim, an attorney, a staff member, a police officer, a citizen walking in the building, you could go into the basement to see if you could get your benefits turned on. But if you needed to speak to somebody about mental health, you could talk to somebody, because this is so important, particularly in the criminal justice system where so many people are affected by mental health issues.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Mr. District Attorney, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal on the mental health question.
So, the rise of mass incarceration, which took about 40 years, more or less, led to the dismantling of 85% of our mental health system. Do you know where we are treating people suffering from mental illness now? On the streets and in jail, primarily. That's the truth. And it's shameful. It does not just mean that we have a specialty court like our excellent felony mental health court, which, I supervise and where a lot of good work gets done. It does not just mean that we look at mental health issues in criminal justice, that there's nothing new there. It means that we have to do what this administration has done. We have to create the resources to have robust mental health treatment by getting people who don't belong in jail out. And so when you look at what we've actually accomplished here, there were 13,000 Philadelphians in state prison. When I came into office, it's now 9,000. There were nearly 10,000 people in county prison. Under Lynn Abraham, there were 6,500 in prison, county prison. When I came in, we're at 3,600. We are creating, because we are doing change-making policies that are controversial with people who want to go backwards and people who want to repeat the mistakes of the past, we are creating space for the resources to do this right, to have the community health centers for people suffering from mental illness that were supposed to have been built when the old snake pit mental hospitals were closed. Well, they should have been built, and they weren't built. And we have the same problem now going on with juvenile correctional type facilities. They were closed because they're snake pits, and now they're not being rebuilt. Why? It's called Republicans. That's why, because people like their tax cuts more than they like human beings. Republicans, like the ones who seem to be wrapping their arms around my opponent. What we actually need to be doing here is much bigger than having a specialty court, although it's a positive thing, and I agree with my opponent in that regard. We need to change the system.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. Judge Dugan, you have 1 minute for your response to the district attorney's rebuttal.
Yeah, so just to let D.A. Krasner know, in these specialty courts, I've been handling felonies for the last 17 years. I also sat in a homicide room, in the preliminary hearing room, and you are basically pulling the wool over the community that's listening to this show right now, because day in and day out, all I saw were young black men in my courtroom for homicide. There were reluctant witnesses as well, and in the body bag were usually young black men. And you are not taking care of those families, nor are you taking care of those victims, because the gun conviction rate is the lowest that it's ever been.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. We're going to move on to our next question. It's about mandatory minimums. This is for you, District Attorney Krasner. Pennsylvania's 2 strikes and 3 strikes laws require mandatory minimum sentences of 10 and 25 years for individuals with prior convictions for crimes of violence. And the state also imposes a 5-year minimum for crimes of violence committed with a firearm. Some critics say that these laws strip judges of discretion and disproportionately impact black and brown defendants. What is your position on mandatory minimum sentencing, and how do you approach cases that fall under these statutes while balancing public safety, fairness, and reform?
So I don't like mandatory minimums at all. I've said that over and over and over. They come in 2 categories. Ones where I have no say. There are certain offenses where if you're convicted, that's it. Prosecutor has no say. And then there is a much larger group where we do have a say, where I have the ability not to pursue a mandatory minimum, but to leave it up to the judge. Even if I want a sentence that is as long as the mandatory minimum, even if I want a sentence that is longer than the mandatory minimum, I don't pursue the mandatory minimum because I think it is wrong. Our legislature, unfortunately, is made up of a lot of people who maybe made it out of high school, have never been police officers, probation officers, lawyers, judges, but they live in Elk County or Carbon County. They want their prisons full, and so they come up with this stuff. It is not criminological. It is not scientific. It does affect black and brown people more. It does affect poor people more than it affects affluent white people. That's the truth. And more to the point, my wife was a judge in the higher court, that is, in the felony court, for many years. In fact, she was on that bench, the common pleas bench, for almost 19 years. And I believe that judges should be independent. I believe that they should have an opportunity to look at the facts with their training and their experience, and I believe they should have a chance to make those decisions. This notion that we should have a one-size-fits-all approach, a cookie-cutter approach, makes no sense for anybody who's been in the system as long as I have, which is approaching 40 years. We have to look at individual justice. There are some people who belong in jail for the rest of their lives. And there are other people who have been involved in a bad moment, but they fundamentally are not criminal, and they should be treated very differently. Mandatory sentencing doesn't recognize any of that. It is a knucklehead scheme to fill up tax bases for prison counties.
Thank you, District Attorney Krasner. Judge Dugan, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal on the issue of mandatory minimums.
Now, you might be a little surprised at this, but Larry and I might agree on something here today.
Amazing. It only took us about an hour to get to one point of agreement, but we got here.
So, yes, mandatory minimum takes the independence away from the judiciary, and I don't like that. Judges should be able to make their own decisions based off the law. And I agree that some of the folks, where some of these laws come from, they don't understand what goes on in areas like Philadelphia. But sometimes people do deserve very long sentences. And if they have that long history of committing violence, sometimes that has to happen. So, but I do not like mandatory sentences at all.
Thank you.
I mean, I could just go on and on, but why?
No, I appreciate that, Judge Dugan, because, yes, we are running a little bit short on time. But District Attorney Krasner, you do still have a minute if you want to respond to that rebuttal.
Well, I'm delighted to see agreement in the House. I actually am looking forward to a more united country than the one that we have at this time, a country that is more, how shall I put it, guided by facts, guided by truth, guided by experience, guided by knowledge, guided by qualifications. That is certainly what I'm looking forward to. So I'm happy to see that Judge Dugan and I can agree on that point, among others, and there certainly are some others. Having said that, we need to recognize that mass incarceration caused a 500% increase in the prison population nationally, but Pennsylvania was special. We had an 800% increase in the prison population, and it did come from this. It came from counties that lost their coal and lost their steel, and they got a new industry. It was called locking up Philadelphians, and I think we know disproportionately who that was. We need to fight that every step of the way, and that's part of the reason those people are after me.
Thank you, District Attorney Krasner. Next question goes to Judge Dugan. Judge Dugan, earlier in this program, we spoke with two individuals who are reentry citizens. And as you both know, the number of folks who are coming out of our prison and jail systems is relatively high for the city of Philadelphia. Can you talk to us and talk to our listeners about what your strategy is from the perspective of the District Attorney's Office in managing and supporting the reentry process for citizens to reduce our recidivism rate in the city of Philadelphia?
Yes, I'd like to embrace some of those as they come out because I think they could be our biggest asset. As I said, I would go up to Graterford Prison to talk to those lifers with young men who are now early entry into the criminal justice system. So as they're coming out, I think we can have them sit down and talk to some of these young people in our system now so that they could give what they did and how they can avoid making the same mistakes so they don't have to go away and do 15 or 20 years so we can prevent them from doing it. I embrace programs such as that as people come out of the system. How can they help society keep from committing the same type of crimes and spending too much time being wasted away, incarcerated? So as a judge, as the leader of municipal court, we led the way with RORs and SOBs, that's release on recognizance, and sign on bond. Started early bail review to help people not be stuck in jail, because every day in jail it's a closer day to that you're going to continue to stay in jail because of what it does to a human being stuck in jail. We have to help these folks as they're coming out of jail. We have to help them find employment, find a meaningful thing to do in society when they get here. One of the things that's been happening is I'm going around the city. They're coming up to me and talking to me about this, and I definitely want the district attorney's office to be involved in this, and I'm sure that right now the district attorney's office has been involved in programs like this.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. District Attorney Krasner, you have 2 minutes for your rebuttal on the question of reentry and how the district attorney's office can support reentry and reentering citizens in a way that reduces recidivism.
Well, it is incredibly important. The whole, at the core of my job, among other things, is public safety. And one of the ways to public safety is to take people who are coming out of custody and are in an extremely vulnerable period, usually of about 90 days, when they may have no housing, they may have no employment, they may not have an identification, they have a criminal record, which is going to preclude them from all kinds of jobs. They got to eat. So unfortunately, some of them, even if they're trying hard not to, are liable to U-turn and go back and do things that can cause crime. My office has been involved with these issues from the very beginning. We have taken a very robust approach to it. Just one part of it is our micro grant program, in which we take money that comes from drug dealers that we can't spend on salaries, and we invest it in community-based organizations that are doing pro-public safety, pro-youth, anti-violence work. Many of these organizations provide employment opportunities, they provide job training opportunities, they work on housing, they work on other skills for people who have re-entered. Make no mistake, this city has on the order of 400,000 people who have a criminal record. Many, many of them have actually done some time and have come out afterward. It would be absurd for us not to do everything that we can to keep them on the right path so that they do not turn around and get busted again. So, that has been essential to what we do at every step. I could point you, for example, to some of our programming, which involves wraparound services that have reduced recidivism by 3/4, that have reduced rearrest by 3/4 because they use cognitive behavioral therapy, they use mentoring, they have full-time social workers who are assigned to a cohort whose job it is to make sure that identifications and birth certificates and whatever else is needed to get them on the right track is used. But that's how we get to the bottom of that.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. Judge Dugan, you do have a minute to respond to D.A. Krasner's rebuttal there.
So some of the processes he's talking about is exactly what I did in the resource center in the basement of the CJC. And this Republican, look at my haircut. I'm a former paratrooper and all that. I'm also the guy who started the eviction diversion program in Philadelphia. 46,000 family members, 46,000 Philadelphia families avoided eviction. $300 million went to the landlords. I also led my bench in expungements. I also sat in safe surrender for those who have bench warrants. I would go out to the churches. So this is just who I am as a man. So I certainly will continue to help those who are coming back into society. I'm glad we got rid of we banned the box on application forms. And I want to use my connections in the business world and in the labor world to help those folks get jobs when they get out.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. Gentlemen, we've arrived at our last question of the hour. And it goes to you, District Attorney Krasner. Running for district attorney is stressful. What do you do to chill out?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. What do I do? Well, I've always loved to cook. It's one of my main ways to relax. I like my cats. I got 2 rescue cats from Kensington who are a real pleasure. It's a brother and sister, and so they play all day and they sit on top of each other, and they never talk back, which is a beautiful thing about cats and dogs and other pets. I mean, those are a few things. I go to the gym, pretty much every day because, among other things, I am a type 1 diabetic. I'm not saying that to boo-hoo. I'm just telling you that's the reality. And I find that it is even better than what some people do, namely alcohol and drugs. I find going to the gym is actually a pretty positive way to deal with your stress level. So, those are some of the things I do. I'm also the world's biggest music fan since I was a little kid walking around with a transistor radio playing Kool and the Gang or whatever I was playing back then. What was it? Kung Fu Fighting? Was that Kool and the Gang? I can't remember. But, music makes me happy. Cooking makes me happy. Being with my family makes me happy. Riding bicycles makes me happy. You wouldn't believe the bike I have. It's the world's coolest version of a Pee Wee Herman bike. It's called a Monster Ripper. Look it up by a wonderful company in Philadelphia. These are things that I do to try to stay somewhat normal and, normal for me. So some of what it involves is I'm going to hit a farmer's market or two because I really love fresh produce. I figure out there what I'm going to cook because it looks good. Those are some of the things I do. Read some books, watch some TV, watch a little stand-up comedy, stuff like that.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. Same question to you, Judge Dugan. Running for D.A. is stressful. What do you do to chill?
What do I do to chill? Frankly, I don't have too much time to chill. I'm trying to reach every single citizen in the city of Philadelphia. But if I could say the one thing that I do, my wife and I are blessed with 6 grown children, but we also have 13 grandchildren.
Wow.
And many of them are in and out of our house on a daily basis. So they keep, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm saying it's stress-free, but sometimes it's not. But I thoroughly enjoy being around all my grandbabies. And it's such a wide, diverse group. If you take a look at my family photo, we actually look like the United Nations. We just represent across the board. And I got to tell you, I am actually enjoying going to church in places that I've never gone to. I've been going to many churches throughout the city. My parish priest is a little upset with me because I'm missing some of our Sunday services, but I've actually enjoyed, and it's probably the most that I can relax is actually sitting in church services. Reverend Waller the other day
Enon's pretty amazing.
The most impassionate sermon I've ever seen. And then I found out we have something in common besides believing in the Lord, is that he served in the Army. He was a scout, a 19 Delta, and I was an 11 Bravo way back in the day. I wound up going back in as a civil affairs and a JAG officer going overseas. But him and I really bonded about our military service. So I like going to church and hanging out with my grandbabies, I guess would be the best stress reliever for me.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. It is now time for closing statements. Obviously, we're going to go in reverse order of the opening statements. You each have 2 minutes here, and we're starting with you, Judge Dugan.
So I want to go back to why I do what I do. I'm getting off the step. Again, when my mother did that as a child, when I was a child, and I saw her do that, she's my hero. God rest her soul. And that's what I knew that I had to do for my entire life. Be the guy to step up when people are in need. And I've been doing that from the time I was a child. I did it when I joined the Army. Again, I was in the service for 6 years during the 80s. I was able to use my GI benefits because it's an economic. That's why I needed a job, so I went in the Army. So I used my veterans benefits to finish college, and then law school. I'm a city kid. I played wire ball. I learned how to swim under the fire plug. That's where I grew up. And then I was blessed enough to be able to become a judge. Just as I was coming home from Afghanistan, Governor Rendell called up and said, we're going to nominate you. So I was able to become a judge in 2007. And for 17 years, I loved being a judge. But just like I got off the couch to go back in the Army after 9/11, just like my mom got off the step, I'm getting off the bench because I think we could be safer in the city of Philadelphia. If we're not feeling safer, letting our children walk home from school, letting our children ride SEPTA, letting our children go to the playground without us, let them go to the corner store, I'm saying we are not safer, we are not freer, and that's why I am figuratively getting off the bench to try to make our city safer.
Thank you, Judge Dugan. District Attorney Krasner, you have 2 minutes for your closing statements.
A couple of factual points. My opponent, Judge Dugan, after 9/11, ran for state rep. He did not go right in the military. That's what he did. And he unsuccessfully ran for state rep. Okay? You have to listen carefully to what is being said, and you have to look at what the facts are. This is part of the reason that I have not just put up the Josie video, the video of Officer Josie beating up this small woman on my social media. I've also put up the Northeast Times article, which talks about this well-funded effort to have Pat Dugan, Judge Pat Dugan, be the Republican candidate if he should lose on May the 20th. We also have the crime data that I've referenced up there. I believe in facts. I believe in truth. We're putting it up. We're not going to just keep hollering, be scared, be scared, be scared. That has been a disaster. And that's actually what you're hearing from my opponent rather than the truth. But let's go back to the first thing I asked. In my opening, I asked him to commit that he would never run as a Republican for district attorney. Do you know what he said? He said, I'm running as a Democrat. Well, I know that. It's not May 20th yet. The question was, would you commit that you would never run as a Republican? And the answer is no. He will not commit to that. This well-funded effort described in the Northeast Times is real. There is a reason why the Republican Party is wrapping its loving arms around Judge Dugan, and that Dugan is also confirmed in the petition signatures, which involve many Republicans. His donors, many of them have given money to Donald Trump. His donors, many of them are actually Republicans. That's also contained in his reports, even when he goes on about these wonderful judges who are claiming I'm unethical. Well, one of them was registered Republican every single time she voted, except this time and the last time. That's part of an effort to get Republicans to re-register as Democrats so they can get at me. We know what's going on here. You all understand what's going on here. And I thank you for your time.
Judge Dugan, District Attorney Larry Krasner, thank you both for taking time out of your schedules in a busy campaign to come on WURD to share some of your thoughts and insights about the office of the District Attorney. We appreciate both of you, and best of luck to both of you in the May 20th primary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. You're listening here, folks, to Evening Words.